Morning, everyone. It's Joe Waxman, and I'm back with another mini reading. This morning, I would like to take a look at the chart of Robert Plant, the famous singer for Led Zeppelin. Now, I already did Jimmy Page, and when I was a kid, I was crazy about Led Zeppelin, as were most of my friends. I don't know why. They were before our time, but I guess we were born when they were still popular, so maybe that has something to do with it. But Led Zeppelin was and is, I mean, remains one of the most, celebrated groups of all time. I think they hold the position of having the number one song of all. Um, Not that that's everyone's favorite, but at least on the charts, Stairway to Heaven, anyway. Um, but yeah, Robert Plant, he remains quite an enigma with his voice and styling and everything that he did for music. So just want to say before we start, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. It really helps out my growth as a channel. So if you like this stuff, please don't forget to do that. Let me share my screen. All right, here he is. Robert Plant, 20th of August, 1948, 3:05 p.m., Bromwich, England, UK. All right. So he's got this very prominent sun in Leo, conjunct Saturn. It's very close to the royal star Regulus, the heart of the lion. So that's very prominent, right? The position, it's in the ninth quadrant house, but very, very high in the sky, very late degree. In Leo, the sun is in domicile in Leo, rules Leo. So this is first thing, anyone with a sun who's so high in the sky, they're going to rise to leadership positions. They're going to be natural leaders in whatever they do. And it's not specific, it could be business, it could be, rising through the ranks of your corporation. It could be, just somebody who's very, very prominent, very seen and noticed, and doubly so when it's in Leo. And even more so when it's in Regulus, if it's conjunct Regulus, and this is within the allowable range of 2 degrees, 2.5 degrees, I guess. So the sun is very, very strong, very visible. Whatever he does, he's going to be recognized and seen easily. It's in the ninth quadrant house and the ninth sign. So there will be a lot of connection to philosophy, religion, higher-mindedness. It's the house of God. It's the house of graduate studies. But for Robert Plant, we can really see the influence of philosophy and that sort of thing. He was very philosophical, spiritual. He included a lot of the mystical, spiritual, philosophical themes in his music and his lyrics. We see the influence of J.R. Tolkien, which is, I guess you would say, that's not really philosophy, but it ties in somehow because it is very high-minded, fantasy-oriented, and brings in philosophy, ties in philosophy, because, of course, it's not the only thing he's got going on, but I relate that somewhat to his ninth house influence as well. Conjunct Saturn, Sun conjunct Saturn is a difficult aspect that often it can create leaders, but it can create people who are just too insecure, doubtful, fearful, because what Saturn does is it weighs you down. It's a negative influence on whatever planet it touches or aspects. It's like, delays and restriction, and it tells you that it fills you with fear and doubt and tells you can't do something. And so a lot of times with people, if the sun is not strong enough, if it's conjunct Saturn or badly aspected by Saturn, the people will doubt themselves too much and never apply themselves into real life situations. They'll just fear everything too much, and they'll never exert their effort because they just feel like they can't do it. Now, that's not always the case. Sometimes the sun is strong enough where it can, it just becomes stronger because of Saturn. Saturn says, oh, you can't do that. You shouldn't do that. Like, you're not able to accomplish that. Who do you think you are? And they'll be like, heck no, of course I can do it. I'm going to do it anyway. And Saturn makes you work much harder, right? Because it has a negative influence, then to break out of Saturn's restriction, you have to work much harder and be more responsible and more mature, right? So because Robert Plant's sun is so strong in Leo, conjunct Regulus, very high in the sky, ninth house is a good house for the sun. It's super strong. And Saturn here is just making him stronger. That's what Saturn does. If you can if you can become strong enough to break out of Saturn's restrictive grasp. Saturn is also ruling the second and third house, co-ruling the third, along with Uranus. But the second house is the house of voice. And we want to see the second house prominent in this chart because it's very important, because we know Robert Plant had this tremendous voice, right? This incredible voice. And he has no planets in the second house. But Saturn is lifted up and brightened up by the sun in domicile, very prominent sun. And this voice is, it makes sense that it's Saturnine, because it's like this, his voice was just like, it wasn't Venusian. It wasn't like pretty. He didn't have a pretty voice. He had a powerful voice. It was cold and it was dark and it was daunting. And it was like, oh my God, Robert Plant, like, you're killing us with your voice. It was very Saturnine. It had this incredible range and incredible power. And like, it wasn't clean. It was like rough, like dirty, like deep and soulful, and like bluesy, and like, oh my God, like from the depths of hell. Sometimes you could hear him wailing and squealing those high-pitched notes in incredible ways. That's Saturn, right? And yeah, I mean, here the sun is so powerful that it's not being held back by Saturn. If anything, it's just making him more humble, right? Even though he's like a rock god superstar, he has a certain amount of humility. We don't think of Robert Plant as having this overblown ego, but his sun is in Leo. But Saturn cools all that, right? It makes him, even though he's like a super god rock star, like, he's not over the top with his ego, right? That's really cool. That's Saturn. And third house, of course, ruling expression. Second and third house together are the real, that's where we get like real expression, second and third house, because voice and then the ability to express the voice in very creative, innovative, expressive ways. That's third house, right? Third house is also writing ability. And along with Mercury, the exalted Mercury, we see that his writing ability was incredible. I just learned something because I was reading his Wikipedia page. And the first album, he did not write the lyrics. That was all Jimmy Page, because Jimmy Page was used to doing it. He started writing lyrics in Led Zeppelin 2, Robert Plant. And his lyrics tend to be much more high-minded and philosophical, again, with the ninth house and exalted Virgo. Like, he's a great songwriter, right? Like, lyric writer. When we get those like really poetic lyrics, we can see why, because exalted Mercury in Virgo, 10th house. Well, this is ninth house by quadrant, but 10th sign. So it's very, very prominent. Incredible for like speaking out to the world, to being seen, to being heard, right? Typically, this is the house of being heard, the 7th house, and it is Gemini. So Mercury's ruling the 10th and the 7th in the 10th sign, but 9th house, right? Super prominent, super, visible for being heard and seen and famous, well-known, renowned. the co-ruler of the third house is in the seventh house in Gemini. Another great position, Uranus, for being heard, right? Because it's ruling the third house. Now, I mean, Uranus in the seventh can really mean kind of weird, shocking speech, especially if Saturn was there, because it would have an inhibiting effect. Kind of like Joe Biden, our favorite guy who just says crazy, weird things that don't make any sense. But here, Uranus is much healthier because it's not being hemmed in by Saturn or controlled by Saturn. And it kind of gives a shockingness, a shocking quality, shocking expression to Gemini, to his expression, to his ability to relate to people, right? And he was shocking. I can't point to anything directly. I mean, planets at the 29 degree are a little bit more subtle, by the way, because they're old and they've been through the sign and they're just kind of quiet. So it's like a much deeper energy. It's not as shocking as if it would be like in the first half, especially anywhere in the sign, basically besides the 29th degree. It's about to change signs. It's called the anaretic degree. So it's going to be a little bit more subdued, his ability to shock people, but he still is this shocking persona in relation to others, right? Because of Uranus here. Now the moon is in Pisces, great for the arts, great for creativity, for imagination, in the third house quadrant. So his expression, he's able to express his heart. His heart is right up there with his expressive ability, with his singing, with his speaking, with all of that. You're seeing his heart, the very creative, expressive, emotional heart. So very powerful for singing, for expressing, for speaking, for writing, for emoting, for getting your emotions out creatively, right? Yeah, and it's disposited by Jupiter in Sag, a Sag ascendant. Now this is really powerful. I'll tell you why, because Jupiter is in its own sign, Sagittarius, in the first house, so it's angular. It's got a lot of angular planets, by the way. Angular planets, well, okay, we wouldn't consider ninth house and third house angular, but they're close to it. They're in the fourth and 10th, actually, but his angles are so off that this still has influence because it's fourth and 10th sign, and then first sign. So super powerful Jupiter in its own sign, domicile. They actually say, believe it or not, that a planet in its own sign is stronger than exalted. So super strong Jupiter here, first sign, giving him as a person this tremendous luck and optimism and joy and all the Jupiterian benefits, making him larger than life. Robert Plant, him as a person. So no matter what he does, he's going to be huge influence. And even though his voice was like tremendous, it wasn't just his voice. Like we know, like his presence on stage was phenomenal, right? It was Robert Plant as a person, along with his voice, along with his writing ability, along with his philosophy and his Leo sun and his, ninth house influence, right? And let me show you something. Okay, Jupiter is stationary direct, 51 seconds is the speed, right? That's super slow. Okay, that is a super powerful Jupiter. And it's ruling the fourth house. So he's bringing his early childhood development to himself. That means early rise to power, because first house is power of the self. It's a fame-giving house. The first house, fifth house, seventh house, and 10th house, right? Because people with strong first house planets, they just show up and they have this aura, they have this presence, they have this ability to do everything. And the first house influences all the houses, right? It's not just about the first house in a bubble. It's influencing every single house. So Jupiter being stationary direct in its own sign in the first house. This is a super powered Jupiter. Super powered Jupiter. Jupiter is the biggest, the most benefic planet anyway. So this is like incredibly strong. And it's influencing the second house because what each house is like pouring over its influence into the next house. If you have a super strong first house, the second house is going to benefit because this is the wealth of the first house. The second house is the wealth of the first house. The 11th house is the wealth or the success of the 10th house, right? So this is the benefit. This is the creative production of the first house. So if the first house is super powered, the second house, meaning the voice, is also going to be super powered. So we have two aspects for the voice to be really powerful. Number one, Saturn conjunct Sun when the Sun is super powerful. His Sun is super powerful, so it's powering up his voice because Saturn's ruling the voice here. Number two, the first house is super powerful and it's overflowing into the second house, adding power to the second house, right? Strength and power. So there we get this tremendous Saturnian voice from Robert Plant due to his first house and his incredibly powerful Sun. I mean, the guy has a really, really amazing chart with these two things here. Now, he does have some difficulties, okay? Venus is in the 8th house. Venus is ruling 6. That's actually not so bad. 6th house ruler in the 8th because they're both considered bad houses, meaning not bad, but like difficult houses, causing trouble because they're imbalanced, because they're in conjunct from the ascendant, right? The ascendant has a hard time seeing this because it's not a good relationship. So 8th house brings death and rebirth. And actually, he did have some troubles in his life. He had, I don't want to say the wrong thing. Gosh, I can't remember where I read it. There was a car accident, and then he lost his son. Okay. Sorry, I don't want to waste time going through this. I read it somewhere, and I can't find it. Okay. Park died at the age of... Okay, they didn't really say, but then on divorce, was seriously injured in a car crash. Okay, so two separate things. Number one, car crash. Okay. This is a accidental house, among other things, just crises in general. This is a house of conflict. Because what happens here is that it's characterized by death and rebirth. So any planets here are in danger of getting knocked down, getting hit, getting in crisis situations. And so Venus is ruling the 6th house, the 11th house, but what's ruling the 5th house? Hold on. So Mars is ruling the 5th house. 5th house has to do with children. Mars is in detriment in Libra in the 11th house. Its dispositor is Venus in the 8th house. Okay, that's dangerous for children. Okay, Mars representing children is in detriment in Venus's sign, and Venus is in the 8th house. Okay, so this is very shaky ground for a child. Not good aspect of. Now Venus is disposited by the moon, and this is actually not bad that moon and Venus have a trine, even though it's not a tight trine, it's still a trine. And this is Venus's sign of exaltation, and this is moon's sign of domicile, rulership. So that's a good aspect. But here we have, but because of this connection, also, Moon is in the third house of short distance travel. So car accident, right? Because of the eighth house connection. Um, yeah, that's not great. But anyway, so we do see some troubles for Robert Plant, some difficult situations, accidents, crises, death. But Venus in the eighth house also gives a love for the occult. And we also see that. I mean, Led Zeppelin was occultic, we could say. And there was talk like about, the whole thing of selling your soul to the devil for success. That was very imbued with the music of the time. If you read some of the lyrics, you can find hints to that. Also, the occultic symbolism that they would do, like the Zoso and the feather and the circles and all that. That's all very related to Venus and the eighth, Pluto at the edge of the eighth. There's more ninth, but still Pluto, occult, right? And that's influencing because of the same sign. So that's also influencing the Saturn-Sun conjunction. Making him even more powerful, even though it's pretty wide. It's still an influence. Probably don't want it too close because Pluto and Saturn are like super intense together. Yeah, I already talked about this Mercury for the songwriting, for being heard and seen because it rules the seventh house. Mars in the 11th, being debilitated, in detriment, opposite its rulership. That's actually great for the fifth house because it aspects, it has the, all the planets have their opposite polarity point aspect. So they all give some benefit to the opposite house, especially if it's in a well aspected sign. So like any planet in detriment or debilitation will have a positive influence on the opposite house, directly opposite. That we can see. So like it's a debilitated planet is not great or in detriment, but it does have this ability. So fifth house, creativity, is well aspected by Mars. 11th house of group networks, things like that, social circles. He's gonna have trouble with, gonna have some issues with. Mars is going to be too, I don't know, wishy-washy, not strong enough, not standing up for himself. But anyway, and this is also the house of career success. So interesting. I mean, he had tremendous career success, but at the same time, I guess it had its lifespan as well. After Led Zeppelin, he still did stuff, but it went down. He had his major career success was in the height of Led Zeppelin. I'd say all the way to Houses of the Holy, which was, I don't know, it was mid 70s, I think. Anyway, it wasn't that long, but because he's so strong in other ways that it really just kept him up at the top of his game. And he won many awards. Like I think he was awarded like like Stairway to Heaven went all the way to #1 at rock songs of all time. But he as a singer was rated #1 at one point, I think by fans, Rolling Stone or something. I just read it. Anyway, but he won all sorts of awards for his vocalization, vocals. He has his North Node in the fifth house, fifth quadrant house, but right on the sixth basically, but in Taurus. And Taurus is the sign of, it's ruled by Venus, but it's a sign of beauty and it's a sign of voice, right? So that's not that we can naturally see very easily early on, because your North Node is second house, so South Node. God, I messed that up. South Node's in Scorpio. Okay. But he did sing all throughout his life. But South Node in Scorpio shows that early on he was even more powerful and sexual, and 12th house creative. right? This is the house of mundane work, right? So I guess as he got older, his lifestyle became much more mundane and just like ordinary, and you know, making money and still singing, but like early on, South Node in Scorpio in the 12th house, that's a lot of creativity, a lot of sexuality, a lot of power, um, and occultism, and just sort of living on the edge. Like, just, you know, Scorpio is not really about accumulating wealth the way Taurus is. It's more about other people's wealth and uh, obtaining power. So anyway, that's interesting. Um, but the real strength comes from this tremendously superpowered Jupiter and this incredibly strong sun as well. Um, and then the other things are just supportive. This exalted Mercury, this moon in Pisces in the 3rd house. And that's pretty much it. I mean, I think I showed his voice pretty well with two things. You know, the incredibly strong Jupiter in the 1st house, Sagittarius. Sag gives him this incredible like swag, like, just, hey man, you know, like that coolness. That's Sagittarius. That's especially Sagittarius ascendant. They're just like, yo, hey, like they're just cool. Sages are just cool, especially on the ascendant. It's like rock and roll. It's like, yo, hey. They just got this way about them. I'm probably not doing it justice. Probably. All right. Oh, by the way, Jupiter is sextiling this Mars, so that's a really strong benefit to the Mars, helping the Mars out a lot, helping career success out a lot. Got a trine to Jupiter, also to Saturn. I mean, basically, Jupiter is aspecting Sun, Saturn, Pluto by trine. So even more strengthening, you know, these three even more. Voice aspect. Doesn't have really too many. Oh, I forgot. Moon opposite Mercury. I mean, for emotional satisfaction, he just needs to talk to other people, communicate with other people. So singing definitely fulfills that role. But yeah, I mean, it just shows a real need to communicate with others in friendship and relationship, and you know, singing will do that, like I said. And this exalted Mercury is excellent. That's excellent for Pisces moon, because that Mercury, that Virgo, is going to give him that incredible editing ability, that ability to really penetrate his, you know, creative urge and just be like, okay, this needs to be cut out, this needs to be added on to, this needs to be organized and rearranged. Like that. That's Virgo. That's what Virgo does. It's like slicing and dicing and editing, and it's the surgeon of the zodiac, basically. With incredible surgical accuracy, it can just cut and slice and organize and remove and paste and edit. But yeah, very strong need to communicate. That's it. Very few difficult aspects. Venus, Neptune square. Neptune ruling the 4th house. So this is also the co-ruler of Neptune is co-ruler of Pisces is Neptune. So early childhood success, 10th house. Early childhood, 10th house, career from early on. Neptune squaring Venus is, you know, they're both creative, artistic planets. And Neptune is very imaginative and delusional, spiritual, drugs, sex, alcohol. Venus is indulgence. 8th house is also sexuality. So this could be like overindulgence in, you know, early on, especially in drug, sex, alcohol, perhaps ability to deceive or deceive oneself, deceive in relationships, because Venus is in relationship. Venus is the significator of relationships in general, especially for men, because it's a feminine planet. But as he gets older, it's gonna smooth out, and it's gonna become a really nice creative aspect to have these two together, just adding to his creative sensibilities. And yeah, this is delusional in relationships as well, like just not seeing other people correctly. If he gets, and we saw that, like he got divorced, right? He was married and he's divorced, and that's fairly common. But with Venus Neptune, there's a real propensity to put on the rose-colored glasses in relationship and to not see the person the way they really are, to be deluded about others, especially women in relationships. So Chiron in the 12th actually shows a great empathy for others, because Chiron's the wounded reject, and in the subconscious, this is showing like an ability to relate to those people who are rejected, who are outcast, who are downtrodden on the, down on their luck. It's showing that heartfelt empathy and sort of concern for those who are rejected and wounded and need help and healing. And it shows an ability to heal spiritually, right? And I mean, one could argue that there was that element within his music, that it was spiritually healing. I mean, to make it obvious, like songs like Stairway to Heaven, it's a song of, I mean, he says it, this is a song of hope, right? So that's the spiritual healing. And it's not just limited to that. There are many others where he was trying to imbue a certain spirituality into his lyrics, into his music, into his singing. Pluto square Chiron. Pluto square Chiron. Gosh, I haven't even really thought about that one. That's not a tight square, but I showing some painful trauma in the subconscious. That's the negative aspect. That's difficult. A lot of pain here. They're unknown from, could be, I don't want to, I mean, if I was going to say like anything like could be related to past lives, but we don't know about, that's speculative. So just it's some subconscious wounding, deep subconscious trauma there. Again, we could say related to his son, the death of his child, probably. Pluto relates to death. Anyway, that's pretty much it. The guy was tremendous. We got some great aspects here. Very well aspected chart. Very super powerful with this Jupiter here. Robert Plant's a legend. True rock and roll legend. So that's pretty much it. I think it shows it pretty well in his chart. So, all right, guys, that's it for now. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. If you want to book a reading, go to my website, macroastrology.com. And I will see you again soon. Thanks, bye.